If you're a sub to the channel, if you either were gifted a sub or you subscribed yourself, you have the right in the Discord to be a producer, to be considered a producer, which gains you access to the producer requests channel, where you can suggest movies or TV shows for us to review on these Fridays. So this one, for example, was suggested by Volk. The Dune, for those of you that haven't seen it, again, spoiler alert, is an American sci-fi movie from this year. It's out in cinemas right now. It's only recently, come out. It was directed by Denis Villeneuve, who is a Canadian director. It was written by him. The script, that is, was written by him and Jonas Spieth and Eric Roth. Denis Villeneuve, by the way, is very known in Canada from what I gather. I haven't heard of him before, but he made Maelstrom in 2001. He also made Polytechnique in 2009 and Incendies in 2010. He's been nominated for many awards in Canada, especially at the Toronto Film Festival. Why I was saying the script, that is, was because the Dune is originally a series of novels written by Frank Herbert, who wrote the novels in 1965, essentially. But yeah, it's set in the future. I think the year 10,000 something, 10,191 is the year when this takes place, and it essentially follows the story of Paul Atreides, who is on the screen right now, played by Timothée Chalamet, who some people have told me that I look a little bit like him. Please agree with it in the chat. Don't tell me anything about that. But essentially, yeah, he is the part of the noble house of Atreides and is thrust into war for the deadly and inhospitable desert planet of Arrakis. It's essentially what this is about is that there's this noble house in space in the future, and they get assigned by the Emperor of the known universe to take care of the planet Arrakis, which is mostly like unruled. It's kind of like wild, but there are some desert people there that kind of live in the desert in their little like underground shelters and stuff. And there are these big desert worms. And the reason why this planet is important for the Empire is because in the sand there is a thing called spice, which allows for interstellar travel. So that's the purpose for the planet, and it all devolves into a story of betrayal. The Empire, it turns out, was afraid of the power of the House Atreides, so they signed, or they kind of betrayed them to the Harkons or whatever, who are like the hundreds of years and like old enemies of the House Atreides. And that's essentially what the whole story is about. Like the very basic part of the story. The story is very dynamic, very deep. The first thing I noticed about the movie is that the world establishment in it is like it's very good. It's deep. It very much drags you in and helps you kind of like really discover a completely new world, a completely new planet. At times, it is a bit lazy. Like, for example, the whole movie started with narration, which I, at this point, kind of feel, unless the narration is kind of part of the story a little bit, in a way that it's narrated by a character that's somewhat, like, imperfect and doesn't just deliver us facts, then it's something else. But generally, narration, I think, is the lazy kind of way to intro into your movie. Which was unfortunately done here, but I kind of looked beyond that a little bit just because of the richness of the world that it portrays. Essentially, it's at least somewhat subtle because it's a character telling her story, and it's over like beautiful desert visuals of the planet Arrakis as well. So it wasn't that bad, but still lazy filmmakers. Okay, lazy. And you say in Dune, it's amazing thing the way they mix different cultures, like Atreides are like cousins, Scottish mixed with Spaniards. I will definitely talk about that, don't worry. The culture thing is a big deal for me. But yeah, Volk talked about the, I think storytelling is made by me or Shadow, maybe, yeah. I think it's all in Discord if you want to check it out. What was I saying? Oh yeah, Volk was speaking about the cultures, and that's immediately something that deepens this story to a great extent, and why I truly did enjoy it. Because you have, so here's the thing, right? And here's like perhaps a common theme that I will be talking about throughout this review. You can't help but somewhat compare it to Star Wars, and the movie kind of leans into it a little bit. There are Star Wars references abound all around the movie, so much so that that at one point I was like, okay, cool it with the fucking Star Wars references, please, all right? But the thing that makes it makes the story somewhat deeper and more interesting to me, at least, is that there is so much mixing, very like clever and cool mixing and mishmashing of different cultures and historical aspects. You have the imperial power sending like a house as in Game of Thrones house, you know, like a noble family sending to colonize a planet for their spice, which is kind of interesting because that very much revolves around the colonization of Europe, or colonization of Africa and mainly India by, for example, the Dutch, that cultivated the spice trade by colonizing parts of India and also the East Indies and all of that. So you have this, for example. Then you have, again, the houses, which is very much like medieval kind of culture, the nobility, the kind of inherited power in some ways. You have that. Then you have somewhat of like witches or seers. In this particular movie, they're called truth sayers, which are able to control people with their minds, which again goes a bit more into the sci-fi, but brings you back into the medieval kind of witchcrafty kind of deal. Then you have different kinds of fighting with swords, which again goes back to medieval times. But the reason why they fight with shields, and I will talk with swords, I mean, and I'll be talking about it later on as well, is because there are shields essentially that like cover your entire body, and they're like invisible shields that can apparently stop bullets, some of them at least. And so that's like the purpose for them using actual swords again. And the style of fighting was very reminiscent of the Aikido style, at least with the House Atreides when there were some fights. So, you know, Japanese kind of influence there as well. And all of that, like all of this mishmash of different cultures and different things, and there are many, many more. It's... It gives the stories depth and dynamics, makes us think a little bit more about our history and culture, and finding all these cultural like inferences and references really do give it that kind of feeling of depth and dynamism maybe. So far the community seemed really good, not gonna lie. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We do have a wonderful community. I appreciate everybody here. But I'm not sure. Actually, Star Wars took inspiration from Dune. Did it? Holy fuck, that actually makes sense, right? 1965, because the book came out in 1965. Interesting. I didn't know that. Please do know that Dune was written 12 whole years before the first Star Wars movie was released. Ah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Fucking hell, mate. But still... like I'm not talking about the story. I'm talking about, and maybe I should have gone more in depth in that case. I'm talking about particular shots, how they were made, how they were filmed. There is, for example, the main character, Paul Atreides, staring off into the distance as the sun sets on a desert planet, and it was shot in exactly the same way as it was shot in Star Wars, in the very famous scene of Luke Skywalker looking at the two suns setting on the horizon. which was made almost like entirely similarly. There was a scene of the Imperial envoy coming on a ship to like a laden carpet lined up with soldiers, and that was exactly as it was done in Star Wars, for example. Another thing, you know, story-wise, sure, there are similarities, but I I didn't really care about them that much. So the point still stands. But I understand it's a good point to bring up, and thank you Shadow for bringing it up. That yes, Star Wars did actually come out after the book that this movie is based upon. So yeah, apart from the story being dynamic and deep, there is a very cool aesthetic as well, and that has to be pointed out. Lots of movies, and especially the new Star Wars, I feel like, go for aesthetics in like sort of before actual depth of the story, and this is a sin that this movie doesn't fall into, I feel like. The story is deep and dynamic, and we will be talking about it a little bit more. I'm using deep and dynamic here as well a lot, but it really feels that way, whatever. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the aesthetics. And they were so, like, it's beautiful, obviously. If you shoot a desert nice enough, you get that feeling of like great expanse. It's like essentially like an ocean view, but the colors are somewhat even more like vibrant. It's very cool, but at the same time you have it interladen with very interesting sci-fi massive cities that are built, you could see, to withstand the conditions of a planet that's entirely made of desert and has sandstorms that are powerful enough to cut through metal. So these cities, together with the very interesting aircraft, space aircraft and spaceships that are very, very cool, and I enjoyed them very much. All of these are just aesthetics, essentially, but it brings about the entirety of the story in a light that makes you like completely drawn in, completely interested, and it works very well. It has that perfect combination or perfect kind of marrying of concepts between the depth of the story and the beautifulness of the aesthetics, essentially. I need to say the duels in Dune are, in my opinion, great and make sense considering the way the shield works. Okay, so let's get into it, because I like Vuk's involvement in this review. I always, by the way, this is the whole point. Flash, you're new here at these reviews, I suppose. So like these reviews are supposed to be like discussions, okay? That's why I'm doing them on stream, on Twitch, and not on YouTube or some shit. I want to foster a debate. That's one of the reasons why I really want to grow a community, because I want the chat to be running with their opinions on the movie that they've seen, And here exactly, Vuk brings up something that I wanted to touch on as well. Is that something that bothered me, I think, the most about the movie, more than anything else, is the sword fighting. I mean, cool. It's cool, yeah? They fight with swords, they have very cool, like, choreography and everything, and they have the shields. But it's the year 10,000, alright? And whilst it is very cool aesthetically and kind of like in the story sense, it makes sense because the culture there is portrayed as very ceremonial and very ritualistic. So fighting with swords kind of goes hand in hand with that because of the cultures in history that work that way as well, because the highly ceremonial and ritualistic cultures very much fought with swords as well in our history, so we feel like it makes sense. But again, you have to realize this is the year 10,000. And yes, I guess the explanation that people have these shields that they can activate on their bracelets, and they have a shield, and like those shields can essentially slow down bullets, so you can like push them aside, essentially. We've seen that in the movie, but we have also seen very powerful projectiles, and those projectiles are capable of blowing up a building like this. Okay, there's like a laser. As the House Atreides is attacked, as they were betrayed by the Empire, and they're attacked by their old enemy, the Harkonnen, on the Arrakis planet. We see that there are a spaceship that are like kind of small, and they were capable of shooting a laser that would explode a fucking building like that. Okay, so we know that the projectiles that they have insane capability and capacity. We've also seen that the shields only slow down the bullets so you can whap them away. But in a scene where a character that has a shield on is shot from behind and aren't able to get to the dart, essentially, in time, the dart penetrates the shield anyway. Okay? The shields aren't perfect. So let me pose you this. If the guns, and like the only guns that we've seen would stop those bullets were some guns that shot some like darts. It looked literally like darts. I kind of get the feeling if you just get a little more powerful gun, then you would fucking obliterate everyone, no matter what kind of shield they have, okay? I kind of don't buy the fact that our culture would revert to swords, to fighting with swords, rather than coming up with weaponry that were able to penetrate the shields. All right, it's cool, and I like that's the thing, you know. I'm a little conflicted. I like the fact that they're fighting with swords, and it's very cool with the shields as well. It's awesome, all right? But still, like it doesn't. I'm not satisfied. Okay, it's not realistic enough for me. It's not explained well enough for me. Dune's shield don't pass through them anything that moves faster than 1 meter per second. What? And darts are piercing shield because they are more like little rockets. Dune's shield don't pass through them nothing passes through the shields if it's moving faster than 1 meter per second? Okay, interesting. So now that makes sense, but it doesn't matter because it wasn't explained to me in the fucking movie, was it? Maybe it was in the book, but that's good. But one of the most important things, okay, whenever you're, you know, watching a movie that's based on a book, even if the book explains something that the movie doesn't, the movie still has to stand on its own 2 feet, so it has to explain stuff well enough. But yeah, another part of the story, by the way, like if it was just this, what I just explained with all like House Atreides and everything, and like kind of similar to like a Game of Thrones in space, that would already for me be like kind of enough, enjoyable. But the movie goes beyond that, and there is this whole thing which is kind of like, again, it's kind of tired at this point, but it's based on a novel that was written in 1965, so we can go beyond that. And that is essentially the narrative of The One. The main character, Paul Atreides, is a product of many centuries of selective breeding between people to bring about a sort of messiah that would be able to bridge the gap. Where was it? Oh yeah, a mind to bridge the space and time, essentially, for a better future. And that, which isn't explained fully in the movie, like why would you need something like that? Because there weren't, like, it didn't show the struggle that would require for something like that to be vital. But again, it probably doesn't have to be. Realistically, if there is a chance of having a mind that would be able to bridge the space and time, then I suppose you would go for it anyway. But it doesn't matter. And this whole thing is essentially revolves around the fact that this main character, Paul Atreides, again, portrayed by Timothée Chalamet, there to the left, has visions and dreams of the future, or of the possible future, and he's able to mind control people And it's this ability that is passed down by his mother and grandmother, there to the right, actually. And it's fascinating. It's very difficult to do something like that well nowadays, because it feels like every other movie is about the one having some kind of a mission. But in this case, I like how it was portrayed, because it feels almost as if the character was kind of like beyond all the fuckery that was going on, all the betrayal of the empire of the House Atreides, the attack of the Harkons. He was like still like involved, you know. He still felt heartbreak over the people that he lost in that battle, but it feels as if his story was somewhat elevated above that story, which, again, I'm going to use this word again, I'm so sorry. It deepens the story, all right? Because there's this whole world as Game of Thrones-ish, and then there is this one character that's kind of like rises beyond that, and has these visions of the future, which, by the way, are of something that will probably only happen in the sequel, in the second movie. And the combination of those two things, along with like what's happening with the Harkons, what's happening in the Empire, what's happening with the Truthsayers, what they want for this new character, versus what's happening with the Desert People, which are also very important there. And their culture is very interwoven with desert cultures of our world, like Bedouin cultures, for example. Very similar there. It just like because for these desert people, like this Messiah or whatever, they have that in their culture as well, and they kind of feel that this guy may be one of them. Or the one, essentially, the one. So, you know, even for the desert people, it means something else than it means for the House Atreides, and that means something else for the Empire, that means something else for the Truthsayers. And this whole story is, again, interwoven into a world that's already very rich, and happenings, and a story that is already very rich. So, together, it's a mishmash of not only cultures, not only aesthetics, but also stories that are so deep and so well expanded upon that it's definitely the movie to watch in 2021. And this brings us again to what I was saying in regards to comparing this movie to Star Wars. Because when I got like halfway in, I was comparing it in my head to Star Wars, and I was thinking, like, holy shit, I am enjoying this movie considerably more than I enjoyed the new Star Wars, the new Star Wars sequels, the 7, 8, and 9. Like, I fucking hated those movies. Those movies fucking sucked, dude. But this one, I feel like, okay, this is much better. I'm really like getting into it, and exactly this kind of very well done mishmash of cultures and actual depth and emotion in these characters in comparison to in Star Wars, this felt superior. And then towards the end, I was thinking, do I just enjoy this movie more than Star Wars in general? And I must say, probably, yeah. Like, genuinely, the level of all of these characters and their emotional involvement, along with the different stories, the different cultures, the world building, I feel like I liked it more than Star Wars, which is a high praise for me, for sure, because I do like Star Wars. But this movie, it genuinely feels like it surpassed Star Wars, honestly. So yeah. The music as well, very well done. And it's the kind of music that you won't probably remember. So maybe not as good as in Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or any similar movies like this, but it's a movie that it's music that perfectly fits into this movie. It's subtle and it has these desert vibes combined with the sci-fi kind of deal. I don't really talk about music a lot during these reviews, but in this particular instance, I kind of felt like pointing it out because it's the kind of music that perhaps won't be remembered by itself, like the Imperial March in Star Wars, or Jedi's Temple March in Star Wars, or whatever the name of the main theme is, or like the King of the Golden Hole in Lord of the Rings, which I played on violoncello, by the way. It's not that kind of music. It's a music that really drags you into the world and complements perfectly with the visuals. And it's both like desert kind of music as well as sci-fi kind of music together, interwoven perfectly together. And there's like so much more to talk about. Like, not only do they have these telepathic things, these ceremonies, these different cultural influences, there is also like the use of sign language between the nobles in situations that are like stressful. And it's very, very well shot every time. There's always like a quick cut and a zoom or something to like the character's hands doing like quick, I can't use sign language, but quick sign language gestures. And that was that was very well executed. And I also had very good subtitles for it, so it was just some subtitle that showed up, kind of saying what the sign language means. Again, like a small thing, but it just deepens the culture, the story, the world, to a further degree, essentially. The attack on House Atreides was a very interesting scene. As I was saying, the Harkonnens attack the House Atreides on the planet on the desert planet Arkan. What the fuck is the name of the planet again? Arrakis. Arrakis. That's the name of the planet. Sorry. Mm-hmm. So the whole attack is kind of like Star Wars style again, because it's spaceship like attacking a city, yes, but a city that very much looks like a giant spaceship. And there's all kinds of explosions going on. There's like cool sword fights, different characters like doing fucking flips and swording and shit. And it's the like visually, the way it was made, like props, very, very well done. So even in the battle scenes, when it comes down to it, the film very much delivers. So that's what I like want to point out. It's the thing is, like, even the setup for it's not like overstated. It's kind of like subtle. There's the betrayal of the Empire, of the House of Atreides to Harkonnen, the Harkonnens like motivations to attack. All of this is done like subtly. It isn't like the fucking Harkonnen saying like, oh, we hate them, we need to attack them, destroy them, they have been our enemies for hundreds of years. It's done well, it's done subtly. The dialogue is great. It's not like perfect like in some other movies that we've seen recently, like The Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Like that's where the dialogue was done in a very interesting way. Like here, I feel like this dialogue, I would describe it as good. And that it is. But yeah, they're not over-explaining anything, and there's only like some small issues with exposition, but those are only like subtleties, because sometimes they are saying things for the benefit of audience, but I feel like every other movie falls into that trap, and this movie doesn't completely fuck it up in that way like some other movies do, and this just like happens from time to time. When I think about it now, in Dune, you feel that humankind is alive and is progressing and prospering, when in Star Wars, all could be one planet. You think so? Well, the main difference is that here it kind of... I feel like it's a bit different, because in Star Wars, they're not humans, right? They just look like humans. But like Jedis and people that look like people aren't actually people. It's all taking place in a galaxy far, far away. It's a random story of random people. They're not even people, random story of random aliens, essentially. Here it is actually about some kind of humankind. You know, it is like implying that these people are still people. Homo sapiens and all that. Although, the desert people, and I forgot their name, the Fomar or something. Could you help me, Vok, with the name of the desert people, please? Um, they uh, they bleed water. Freeman. Really? Oh shit! That makes a lot more sense. Thank you. Like Morgan. Thank you, mate. Freeman. Okay, yeah, the Freeman. They bleed water, which is very interesting. And also, for a greeting and a show of respect, they spit. Because it's considered a gift of your moisture, essentially. And that is very emblematic of the cultures of the Bedouin, for example, in our world, because it implies the preciousness of water for these people, for these desert-dwelling people, essentially. Just like for us, blood is kind of precious, you know. It's kind of what we throw at each other when we war, I suppose, like spilling blood or stuff like that, you know. Makes sense. The dreams and the visions of Paul are also done very well. They're, you know, kind of dreamy, kind of a little bit out there. Nothing special, but it adds to the story very well. Like filmographically, from a film standpoint, it isn't like revolutionary in the way that they are shot, but they are added in places in the movie and done in an expositional capacity in a way that they truly do kind of add to the story as a whole, you know. And I just say I love seeing it with those palms in holy place that waste daily water for 5 men each, and because that shit happens in real life. I like that scene as well. I've added it. I don't know if the image already popped up, but I've added it into the images that are running on the screen right here. And yes, I like that scene as well. But I don't have the same interpretation as you, Volk. It's because, like, remember that, like, in the scene there was Paul, and there was this, I assume, like, servant or gardener or whatever, who said, like, one of these trees consume as much water as 5 men in this like in a day. And Paul says, well, we should cut them down, right? And this guy, the servant, who is, by the way, one of the freemen, one of the people of the desert, said, no, these are sacred. Which kind of, I don't think that this is supposed to be a commentary on, like, environmental issues, that we waste water as well. I think it's more about, like, the connection of people, like the connection of these desert people to some kind of ceremony or some kind of sanctity. You know, it more talks about, because for them water is extraordinarily sacred, and we already knew that. So for them to maintain trees like this that are extremely expensive when it comes to water, it is clear that these people are not only just about, like, water and shit. They also obviously have their own religion, their own cultural, like deeply cultural and societal ceremonies and important things that go kind of beyond just water. You know, water is still important to them, but it's clear that culture and religion is important as well, which I feel was conveyed to us so as to understand that like the prophecy of the One is important to them as well, just as much as it is for the House Atreides and the Empire, which I feel is good, you know. But anyway, after the attack of the House of on the House of Atreides by the Harkonnen, Paul and his mother managed to escape, and they managed to find a group of desert people, of the freemen, sorry, and they, you know, there's a bunch of shit that goes down as well. Like, there's a battle between Paul and one of their best fighters for the right to, like, lead them or whatever. It's one of the ceremonies or rituals, which was kind of interesting as well. But one of those people in that band was a girl that was portrayed by Zendaya, by the way, that Paul had visions about. And she actually has the last line in the whole movie, which when they are going towards like one of their settlements through the desert, she just replies to Paul, looking at the desert, saying "desert power," and which connects to something, to like a conversation he had with his father, whilst the girl replies, "This is only the beginning," which I feel is a very cheeky kind of last line of a movie that already has a scheduled sequel. But I kind of liked it. I liked it for that reason, because they plugged their sequel in the last line of the movie, but they've done it like okay, you know, it makes it isn't like it's done with taste, you know, it's not distasteful, it's not ugh, essentially. So I like that. But what I would say like about the movie overall, what is important as well to say, it's that the world was like immediately captivating. It drawn me. It has drawn me in straight from the start because of what we talked about, the culture, the history of real world kind of being mishmashed into a sci-fi, and it remained thrilling all the time. Yet the story deepened as it progressed, you know, so it managed to hit that right spot between like the stuff being thrilling while not being empty, which is a difficult combination to attain. But yeah, why did I enjoy it more than Star Wars? It had a greater focus on culture and society, as well as individual emotions. Star Wars, I feel, is like a great fairy tale and an epic story, but I don't really... I do empathize with the characters, but they're not as fully fleshed out and not as deep emotionally as the characters in Dune. And their pathway, isn't as deep and as I feel like emotionally deep as it is in Dune. So yeah, I may go as far as to say that I enjoyed it more than Star Wars, full stop. And honestly, the one thing that I'm worried about is that they will fuck it up in the sequel. I really don't want them to fuck it up, because I'm actually excited for Dune Part 2, which was, by the way, confirmed, and its planned release is in October 2023. So a year from now, essentially, almost. Next year, towards the end of the year. So we will have to wait for a while.